Hi, Mama. Hi, Nicole. Hello, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining. Okay, let's see, Nicole, I see you. Let's see. Okay, here you go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So happy to finally see you on like video. I feel like we have met.
I know it's kind of like our first time meeting, right?
I know. I'm doing good, Mom. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, well, we have people joining us. Nicole, you look so pretty. I love the color of your hair.
Oh, thank you so much.
So, Nicole, today is just going to be us. My cousin, she missed her flight, so she is unable to join us.
Oh no.
Yeah, so she's traveling with her kids, and she you could already imagine how it is traveling with two kids, and she missed her flight, so she is not going to be able to come on. So it's just actually me and you this evening.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Dr. Shadeiyah Edwards. I'm a forensic psychologist, and I am your business and mindset coach. My co-host, Rosita, is not here with us today. She missed our flight, so it'll just be me and our guest, Nicole. I'm going to actually hand it over to Nicole so she can introduce herself to everyone.
Hi, so my name is Nicole Kanke. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, and I am in Ventura, California, and I specialize in trauma and addiction.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you on. Like I said, I love the support, the humbleness. You support everybody on social media, especially everybody in mental health. Like you support everybody, and I just love it. And you're always just so humble, easy to talk to, like you talk back. And I was like, I'm gonna ask her to come on and talk to us. So I'm so happy to have you. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump in. So, first question I want to know is what led you into the mental health field and wanting to be a therapist?
So when I was like, I think 21, I got my first
Hmm.
job working in a boys group home here locally. So one of my
Okay.
stepdad's friends owned a group home and he said, are you interested in a job? And
Hmm.
so I got, I went in and I interviewed him and I got to meet a couple of the kids. There was probably like six kids there. It was a male group home of adolescents. And we had two different homes. One was for kids who had mental illness, and then the other one was for kids, I think, who'd experienced like abuse and neglect. And I think that just as soon as I started, I knew it was my calling. I knew it was something that, I was going to be passionate about. I knew it was, just everything that I needed to do with my time and my
Hmm.
energy. I like what you said about, how you noticed how I show up on social media because I try to be really intentional with how I spend my
Hmm.
time. And so when I observed the effects of trauma, because even the kids that were in the other house that had mental illness, they had
Hmm.
always, experienced trauma. Um, I realized I want to learn, how to help, in any way
Right.
that I can.
I love that. I love that. And for all my students that are on here, can you tell them what your theoretical orientation is? Or are you more eclectic?
I would say I probably am more psychodynamic
Okay.
and trauma focused. So I
Hmm.
do I do use cognitive behavioral therapy, but I also use mindfulness. It depends. I guess it is eclectic because it really depends on
Yes.
the client and meeting them where they're at. I mean, I just pull from all the different theories that I
Hmm.
can. I just have it in my toolbox and utilize that, just based on what they need. And sometimes, it's just listening.
Yes, exactly. And I'm glad that you said that because it does sound like you're more eclectic, you're more integrative. and you're about meeting the client where they are. You know, we have our field has evolved so much where you're not really seeing a lot of the newer therapists use just one modality, right? They are doing what works best for the client. Like I always tell my students, we're not trying to fit clients into a modality. We have to make it work for our clients.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, they know, they can quote me on that. I say it almost every day in class. Thank you for that, because that's a question that they always ask, like, well, how do I know what my orientation is going to be? You know, that's like the big thing for a lot of students is, you know, wondering, you know, what framework am I going to use? So I wanted to make sure I threw that out there for them because a lot of my students follow me. Um, okay, so this is, I know you said you specialize in trauma. Can you tell us what trauma is and some of the different types of trauma?
So trauma, well, I guess trauma can be a single event or it can
Mm-hmm.
be, an ongoing experience that a person has. And, both can present with different mental health symptoms. Um, and so trauma could, it could be directly experiencing, a violent crime or witnessing a violent crime, one time that can result, depending on your psyche. Trauma is
Mm-hmm.
different for every single person. And so, what's traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you, but so that's an example of like a single event.
Right.
You've experienced something violent, and then after that, what we'll see is there's a variety of clinical diagnoses that you can fall into. Not everyone that
Mm-hmm.
experiences a trauma will
Right.
develop a mental illness, but it is something that can happen.
Right, right, right. And what can you name just a few of the different types of trauma so we can kind of build context and our viewers can understand? Because sometimes I think people, when you say trauma, they think of something so significant, right? Like they like sexual abuse, you know, physical abuse, but there's more layers to trauma than just very extreme forms of trauma.
Absolutely. There's emotional abuse, there's, bullying, there's, racism, there's
Mm-hmm.
homophobia, there's so many different experiences that, humans have that can affect them in this way.
Right. Oh, you have somebody on here, client-centered focus. Them is I don't know what that says. Client-centered. I love humanistic. I love client-centered. Actually, my dissertation, I used Carl Rogers in my dissertation. I love Carl Rogers. Hi, P. Booker. That same person, them says,
Uh-huh.
hit them with that generational trauma, Nicole.
Oh, generational trauma, yes. So there's, poverty, there's, addiction, substance abuse that can be passed down in families. And so that's another thing. A lot of people don't know that they're coping with their trauma
Mm-hmm.
these ways. And so there's, all these different behaviors. Like it doesn't even necessarily have to
Mm-hmm.
be substance abuse. It could be,
Right.
overeating. It could be, spending too much money. And that is, a lot of people don't recognize that, is a trauma response. And so
Right.
it's how it shows up in like your functionality. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. One of the things that I try to parallel with a lot of my students is, you know, because a lot of them are like, oh, I'm scared to work with couples, I'm scared to work with families, and I'm trying to get them to understand. A lot of times when people are in individual therapy, they are bringing in things from their childhood, right, or things about their spouse. Then when you're working with a couple, a lot of things that they're talking about, they're bringing in childhood stuff, right? Then now you have the family. So it everything that we're trying to do is getting back to homeostasis, right? We understand that, and I try to parallel it for them. It's like, okay, now you have this family in here. Now you can see the full picture of what's going on. and how things are passed, through generations. You said, oh, experience. I'm trying to make sure I'm staying up with the comments. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. And Nicole. So, how does trauma impact us, Nicole?
So trauma can impact us, through a variety of different mental health issues and physical
Mm-hmm.
health issues. There was actually a study, I think it was done by Kaiser in the 90s on adverse
Mm-hmm.
childhood experiences. So we're talking a little
Yes.
bit about childhood trauma. And,
Mm-hmm.
the more of these experiences that you have, the more likely that you are to develop, a mental illness later on in life and, a physical health issue, something like, heart disease, diabetes, those types of things. Because again, the way that we're coping with our emotional health, sometimes can be unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so some of the mental illnesses that you can develop through a trauma can be like major depression, and that, that looks like, a lot of different things. It looks,
Yes.
it doesn't look the same in every single person
Right.
either. There's certain symptoms that come up, but it's not, I guess, it's not uniform,
Right.
is the
Yeah,
word.
definitely. Um, and then let's talk about some of the common experiences and responses to stress, how people respond to the stressors.
So commonly, something like a post-traumatic stress disorder, you'll see people become more avoidant, isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can lead to suicidality. You can start to have, thoughts of hurting yourself, thoughts of hurting others, resentment, blame, shame, guilt,
Mm-hmm.
um, really like not pleasant feelings.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. And you're probably hitting it because everybody is liking this. You're probably hitting it really on the nail for a lot of them. Um, where you are in Ventura County, do what are some of the diagnoses of a lot the clients that you see in your private practice?
So in my private practice, the primary diagnosis that I see is post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's chronic. And I
Mm-hmm.
see complex post-traumatic stress, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't in our diagnostic manual, but
Right.
there is a lot of research and development in that area, and that is probably what I see the most is folks who've experienced childhood trauma and kind of like you said, it's not always sometimes it is sexual, child sexual
Right.
abuse or child physical abuse, but there's oftentimes people will come to see me and they don't even recognize that what they've experienced was a trauma, something like
Right.
poverty, growing up in a lower, socioeconomic area, growing up
Mm-hmm.
in, community violence. That's something I was just
Mm-hmm.
talking to somebody about the other day, that if you've witnessed, like I said, if you've witnessed violence, that's
Mm-hmm.
something that can be part of your day-to-day life growing up in, certain areas that you don't
Mm-hmm.
even realize that is traumatic, that has
Right.
created, this sense of danger, and some of those other, symptoms that I was talking about earlier.
Yes, definitely. And in my nonprofit, our focus, we work with reentry, incarceration gangs. And, me growing up in South Central Los Angeles, I've lost a lot of friends. A lot of my friends have been murdered or incarcerated. And it really, people don't realize how much it affects you, right? And sometimes you grow numb. And a lot of these kids that we see in the inner city, they're numb to violence because it's a occurrence, it's something that's happening on a daily basis. But we know that access to mental health is not always accessible. And I don't want to get deep into the systemic part of it, but we know it's not always, and it's not always affordable, right? And many therapists aren't like, oh, okay, I'm gonna open my private practice in Compton or Watts. You do have a few, but there's not a lot of private practices in those marginalized communities. And we know seeing a clinician in private practice is very expensive. So they're having to, deal with this stuff day to day, just trying to cope, just trying to make it. Um, so this is always important to me, and I think we've seen this difference um, evolve over time in our field. But how important do you feel it is to be trauma informed, and not just as clinicians, but community? Just think of community, these nonprofits. Do you think that's highly important?
Oh yeah, I think from a 0 to a 10, it's at a 10. It's so important. It's number one top priority. Absolutely.
Yes, and I do a lot of trainings on trauma informed care. Nicole, what are some tips that you could give to those that aren't in the mental health field to be more trauma informed, just on a daily basis in a grocery store, or at the gas station, just in the day-to-day life, just being more trauma informed, and kind of giving grace to some people that may curse you out in a grocery store line. You never know what people are going through. So you have a few tips that you can share?
Well, I think that that's a big part of what I try to help, a lot of the clients that I work with develop is compassion, right? Compassion for
Mm-hmm.
themselves and compassion for others. And you're absolutely correct that when we're moving through the world, to be trauma informed is to recognize that, a lot of people are functioning at the level, to the best of their ability. They don't have the resources. They don't have, the ability to address these traumas. And so that leads to, some of these unhealthy coping skills that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not even unhealthy. I mean, it's so much deeper than that. But um,
Definitely. Let's see. Book That Soul says, do you encourage spirituality, or do you just avoid the topic and allow the client to talk about religion? Curious.
I think that's a really good question. So I said kind of in the beginning, I meet the client where they're at. And so religion and spirituality is definitely something that clients bring into the room. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I work with it based on how that, because it can be something that can be a strength for them,
Right.
that can really help them to move through the trauma that they've experienced. And so if it's brought into the room, then I definitely utilize it. But I think that's kind of the way that I approach spirituality and religion.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Somebody says self-medicating, social determinants of health, setting up people for failure, patience and compassion safely. Yes, non-proactive choices. Okay, so because you work with very high intense clients, it sounds like, what do you do for self-care? How do you take care of you?
So that's super important, right? Because I have to always address my mental
Mm-hmm.
wellness. And so I have to have a routine. What's really important for me is that I have a daily routine where I'm taking care of myself and addressing my self-care. And so I
Mm-hmm.
start my morning, by making sure that, I'm eating, that I'm hydrated, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
showered, that and checking in with myself emotionally, if I need to take a second, I give myself plenty of time before I start my day to grieve, to process, because sometimes I wake up and it is really heavy, right? It is really sad. It is, or I'm really angry, or there's some sort of emotional response, because we do experience vicarious trauma when we're working,
Mm-hmm.
with
Yes.
in the field, and so I had to
Yes.
figure
Yes.
out
Yes.
that, I really need this space for myself, and it's all just by myself that I'm processing. And so I'll use different things. I really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
meditating. I really enjoy journaling, listening to music, dancing, calling
Mm-hmm.
on my friends, like, whatever I
Right.
can do. It's kind of just like my me time. And I make sure that every day I have a good amount of time that's for me. And then also at the end of my day, taking that and having like a bedtime routine in a way that, I'm winding down. And then throughout my day, taking breaks. and
Mm-hmm.
resting, sometimes I take a nap. And making sure I
Yeah,
have
nap.
space for that because it's so
Mm-hmm.
important that we're, addressing. But I'm very blessed that I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
position that I have a schedule that allots for that, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
I don't have children and, I have
Right.
space to really focus on my mental health. And that isn't the case for everyone. And this is
Yes.
just, how I manage it as, a clinician in the field.
I
I
like
can't, I
that.
can't even imagine what it would be like to have children.
Ooh, it could be quite a bit. Okay, so you said something in there, and just so people can understand what vicarious trauma is, in case they don't know.
Yeah. So vicarious trauma is when you're working with trauma, when you're listening to trauma narratives and you're hearing about stories um, where there's violence, where there's abuse, you yourself can start to experience kind of like I was talking about, rage or grief or sadness, and it's really important that you have a way of processing that. Whether
Hmm.
it's in your individual therapy, or some of the other things that I was talking about.
Now, your role, a lot of students, ask these questions, and I know they want to know, so I'm going to ask for them. But how long? Okay, so you said you knew in your 20s that you wanted to be a therapist. Kind of take us through your role. Oh, wait, you have a question. Sounds like the variables are many. Are there any commonalities? Seems like such a wide range, complex phenomenon. I don't know that. I think she may be talking about the vicarious trauma. Books that sow. Can you break that down a little bit for us?
What was that?
Can you see her question? I think she was talking about the vicarious trauma. Waiting for her to let's see. Oh, yes, that's what she's talking about. Nicole, can you see her question?
I don't think I can.
It says, sounds like the variables are many. Are there any commonalities? Seems like such a wide range, complex phenomena.
Oh, commonalities.
Yeah. And she was
Was
talking
that?
about she was talking about the vicarious trauma.
I don't think I understand the
Can
question.
you break that down a little bit, books that so, please? It moves a little slower than she's probably typing in now. Okay, we're going to keep going, and then when she comes back. So, walk us through becoming an MFT. What are the steps to becoming a marriage and family therapist?
So the steps, I mean, there's a lot of education behind it. So you start with, getting your associate's degree. And so I got my associates at the community college here
Okay,
in
but
Church
you don't
County.
have to go there. You could start with a bachelor's, right?
You can start
Okay,
with a bachelor's, right? You can
okay,
move into it, but so that's how you get to the stage of bachelor's.
okay.
So I got my bachelor's in
Mm-hmm.
psychology at the
Okay,
Cal State Ten Islands, and then I
okay.
transferred to my master's program, which was at Antioch in Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay. I teach at Antioch.
Cool.
Yeah, I teach
So
at the LA campus. Oh, so
yeah,
I know your
really.
program. I teach. I teach
That's
in your
amazing.
program. Definitely. So once you graduated with your master's, how many hours did you need to receive?
So once you graduate with your master's, you have to accumulate 3,000 hours of face-to-face clinical contact. So and there's different categories for different licenses, but I'm a LMFT, and so for ours, there's a certain amount of hours that you have to accumulate for couples and families and working with children, because that's our
Mm-hmm.
specialty, that's our niche.
Right.
So our hours, the 3,000 hours you just
Mm-hmm.
had, I think it was like 500 that you get with that. And then that's when you sit for two different state licensing exams. And the first one now is law and ethics. They have
Mm-hmm.
you study that, or I mean, take that test, and then you take another one, and then that's when you are licensed. And it definitely
Wow.
takes, depending on how much you're working, right? It can take a couple of years. It can take longer than that even.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people are working part-time trying to, get to this next step. It's a long process.
Okay, she said the topic seems like it's wide and all over the place. It's a hard task supporting people with trauma concerns. You work with so many people who have a variety of concerns. Do you see commonalities? Oh, I'm frozen. Let me try to rejoin. Okay, we won't answer that till you come back. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you get licensed. One of the things that a student just asked this too. So when you were you placed at a site that you were able to get paid while you got your hours?
At my trainee site, I was
Mm-hmm.
paid for the crisis time. So some of the time I wasn't paid, but I was paid for
Mm-hmm.
like when I was on call and I would respond
Okay.
to crisis. And
Okay.
then and then once I got to internship, then they were all paid.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, good. That's what I
So
meant to say. Internship, not practicum. Internship. So
mhm.
you were able to get paid through your internships. Okay. She's back now. Can you see her question?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so commonalities, yeah. So you'll see people who have a variety of different, experiences that come in, but the commonalities oftentimes is, emotional dysregulation. Um, that's probably one of the, most common things that we see and that, we're kind of working through. And that can look like, having like, anger management, troubles or conflict in relationships is really common. Conflict with, academic functioning sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say sometimes, often I see in the impact. And those are the
Mm-hmm.
commonalities. And
Okay.
then, depression is really common to go along with post-traumatic stress disorder. I'd say that I see that often. Or panic attacks, panic disorder. Um, those tend to come along with trauma.
Okay.
Am I answering the question?
Good.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you did. I'm sure she'll let us know what she
Okay.
said. I wish we had your expert services on school campuses, especially in urban schools. Where are you at? Books that sew. Let me know what where you at. Okay, you have another one. It says, have you ever been afraid during a family therapy session?
Ever been afraid to do a family therapy session?
No, I guess just afraid during maybe it got out of hand or something. I'm thinking that's what she means.
Oh, I mean, yeah, they're probably the more tension. You could definitely have a lot of tension in a parent-child session. So I think that that's where I had to practice my breathing skills and then recognizing what my role is as a therapist, right? And keeping everybody safe and containing the room. But I mean, I think that that can happen even, an individual
Hmm.
working. You can know how people are
Yeah,
feeling, what they're going through.
you never
Mhm.
know. Yes. So she said that, yes, you answered her question. Thank you, Books That's So. And you're in Houston. I have to think, you know what? I do have a colleague, Dr. Earl. He's here now, but he's actually from Houston. Books That's So. Maybe he can connect you to someone. On IG, it should be Dr. Earl Turner. If you type that in, you should be able to locate him. If not, let me know. But he is from Houston, but I think he's been here in LA for maybe about a year or two. And I think maybe he can connect you with someone. Hey, Mike. Um, so one of another thing that's very important that I try to stress is the importance of therapists having their own therapists. And I was reading your Psychology Today bio, and that's one of the things that you mentioned the first time you looked for a therapist. How was that process for you?
It was terrifying. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what mental health was. I didn't know what was going on. And it was a requirement for our program. So I just was looking, I was like, I think I have anxiety, and so I was like trying to look on there and I find this lady and she was so sweet and compassionate and quiet and listened, and it was this amazing experience that I had. And I've utilized therapy ever since as part of what I need to incorporate.
Yeah.
And then as I got deeper into the work and really realized if I'm going to work especially in the field of trauma, I need to have that support system.
Yeah, definitely. Are you still seeing the same therapist?
You know what? She recently just moved to Tennessee, so
Oh,
I'm looking for
wow.
a new therapist.
So talk about that because I used to even tell my clients is it's like dating, right? Finding a therapist is like dating. Just because that first one didn't work out, don't give up on the process, right? Or if you date somebody and it doesn't work out, do you just say like, "Oh, I don't want to date anymore"? So what
Yeah.
is that process like for you being a therapist, looking for another therapist?
Well, I've been through a few different therapists, and so I've gotten different perspectives, and now I'm at the point where I recognize, kind of how to utilize it, and I've worked through some of the. I think I had a lot of attachment issues that came up, and I worked through that as I had to transition because that was really
Mm-hmm.
hard to transition from one therapist to another because that's you've opened up about all these personal things, and then
Mm-hmm.
they really understand you, and something could happen when they move to another state, and then you got to start all over again. You find
Right.
someone that you vibe with because it really, I mean, it really is like you said, like dating. You're not going to vibe with every single person that you meet, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing for therapy because you're going to be talking about really deep, intimate things that might bring up feelings and you really got to feel safe with that person. So looking for a therapist as a therapist, I think that's what I'm looking for, somebody who I can feel safe with.
Mm-hmm.
Who's
Yes.
going to
And
understand, like where I'm coming from.
mm-hmm. And since you said you've been through a few different therapists, and not to get too deep into that, right? But was there like you just wasn't vibing with them? Because one of the things that people don't realize that's important is relationship building. You can know every theoretical orientation, right? But if you don't know how to build relation, you may miss the opportunity to really work with your clients and do really good work if you don't know how to build a relationship with them. And that's really a big factor in being a therapist, is knowing how to build relationships. So do you think that was some of the issues that was happening with some of the other therapists you've seen?
Yeah, I definitely felt like that was the issue is that I wasn't connecting with them on that personal level. That
Mm-hmm.
and so that they could have all these theories and all this information, but it didn't feel like there was a relationship there. And as a clinician, that's like my number one priority. And I tell people that right when they walk in the door, like that's our relationship is key. I need you to let me know if I make you feel uncomfortable. If I say something wrong, you have every right to call me out. This is not about me, being higher up or anything like that.
Right.
Um, because it's about and that's what we're teaching each other. We're
Mm-hmm.
teaching our clients how to be in relationships. And I say each other because they teach me every single
Right.
day how to show up better in my own relationships.
Yes. And with you working with people that have like some, severe trauma, that relationship building is so important because being able to discuss and disclose things so personal, that's heavy. And I know it's not always easy for them to open up. So when the clients that you work with, the traumas that come in, what are some of the main traumas that you feel like you've been treating, let's say in the past like 3 years?
In the past 3 years, I would say I've seen a lot of childhood neglect,
Mm-hmm.
um, exposure to domestic violence in childhood, domestic violence in adulthood, um, violent crimes. I've seen a lot of people who have, experienced violence of some sort, victims
Mm-hmm.
of suicide. Like someone in their family has died of
Mm-hmm.
suicide. That's definitely gone up, I would say, in the last couple of years. In my own practice anyway, I've seen quite an increase in suicide and the trauma that
Mm-hmm.
creates within families.
Oh yeah, I could only imagine.
Substance abuse. I mean, as soon
Mm-hmm.
as the pandemic hit, I was like, dang, I already know,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, this is the direction that, this is likely going to go, is a lot of people are going to fall into addictions.
Right. Oh, how do you approach the cultural stigma of therapy? That's a good
Mm.
question.
It definitely is and it depends on the client and their cultural background, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
each client has their own individual cultural background, and you really need to meet them where they're at, and let them educate you about their culture and the stigmas that, they may have, been exposed to or have themselves.
Mm-hmm. That was a good question.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm making sure, looking through. I think I got all the questions. I think I did. If you have any other questions, drop them in here before me and Nicole wrap up. Nicole, this has been amazing. I mean, we could talk about, I mean, this topic is something that we could talk about for hours, you know. This is not even enough time to really unpack and really discuss trauma and all, its different layers. One last thing that I do want to focus on is the private practice, because I do focus a little bit, not just a little bit, but I focus a lot on the business of it. So the business side of being a therapist, can you walk them through that a little bit?
Um, well, in order to, I guess, private practice, you can do it a couple of different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
the practice that I'm at, we take insurance, and so a part of the work that we do is also this kind of like background where, you're applying to health insurance to
Mm-hmm.
get paneled as a provider, and then, providing, diagnosis to the insurance, and um and that's kind of like this newer thing in the last 5 years, actually, I would
Uh-huh.
say, 'cause I've been in private practice for a while, and before it was kind of you just take cash, and now
Right.
that's what I like about the practice that I'm at, is that we take Medi-Cal, and that was what really, lit me up about it, is that I wanted to be able to serve
Mm-hmm.
that population. And so getting, in a position where I can do that, has been phenomenal. I'm really just so grateful that, people can come and see me and utilize their insurance. But
And
there are
that's
a lot of people in
amazing.
private practice who don't use insurance, right? Because it's a
Right.
lot of
I
work.
love that what you just said is because a lot of private practices don't like taking Medi-Cal because the reimbursement is low. If they do, they usually put students
Yes.
to see the clients. So
Mhm.
what you just said is that you actually see clients that are on Medi-Cal.
Yes.
You better go ahead, Nicole. Because a lot of
I'm
clinicians
so
won't do
grateful
that.
for it. Hmm.
Be honest, like a lot of clinicians would not do that because the reimbursement is low.
Yeah, that's
That's
because
amazing.
that's
So
not
they,
what I'm doing this for. So,
I love that. See, and that's why we say you're just so humble and so graceful. So you're in a group practice,
mhm.
right? How many clinicians are in the group practice? And how
um,
many do you
so,
supervise?
so I supervise three. So I have three
Okay.
associates that I supervise underneath me, and then there's probably like 5 other licensed, I think, and then another one of the clinicians there also supervises. So she has her 3 associates, because in private practice you can have 3 associates. An
Okay.
associate is someone who's still collecting their hours
Oh,
towards becoming a licensed clinician.
mm-hmm. Love it. Books that sold. She said, I'm so happy I joined. I learned a lot, and even though I'm not in this field, I can take something away from it in terms of my approach with others. Books that sold. That's. I'm thinking she's like a maybe she's a student or a new therapist. She asked some really good questions.
She sure did.
Immigration immigration reports is the new niche. Get paid your worth. I think that's just
Mm.
yeah. I don't know. My best friend, she actually does immigration. She's a lawyer, but I do know a few psychologists that do immigration reports as
Hmm.
well. But everybody, her worth may not be in dollar amounts. Minor toe major. I think that's what it says. Yes. So Nicole, I we are going to wrap up. Do you have any last minute tips for students? For students, and then any last minute tips for people dealing with trauma?
Oof.
Oh, his name is minor to major. Okay, I got you.
Well, I think for students, we talk I know that we talk so much about self-care, but it really is, you know, so important that you address your own mental health. Everybody has mental health, and the sooner that you can, get acquainted with your emotional experience and how to manage that in a healthy way, the better, because it really does, trickle out into your relationships, and it can limit you. It can stop you from, meeting these beautiful goals that, you may have. And you might not even
Yes.
realize that that's what's happening. People get really stuck in these cycles. And even as a student, I think that it can be so stressful and overwhelming,
Right.
being a student, that you lose sight of things like eating and drinking water and getting enough sleep and all that, and trying to balance it. And I think that once you're working in the field, you're still gonna need to know how to balance that. So, you know,
Right.
you're
That's
gonna need to
true.
you're gonna need to balance it just as much.
Hmm.
It's
I
all
love
stressful.
that. And any tips for people that's dealing with trauma or really just trying to understand what they're experiencing? Because sometimes, like you said, people don't even know that what they experienced was a trauma.
Right. And so recognizing that you're numb, how do you recognize that you're numb?
Hmm.
And that's a really big question. Are you connected to your body? Are you connected to your spiritual life? How are your relationships? How are you doing with your, occupation, with your work? How are you doing with, all these different areas? If you're seeing that you're struggling in those areas, it's okay to ask for help, right? and
Hmm.
and there are people who want to help and want to hear your story, and a lot of times that's all that you need to do, is you just need to get it out. You just need somebody to witness it. And so I think taking that first step to, addressing your mental health and sitting down with someone who wants to just kind of get to know you and help you with anything that's blocking you from meeting your goals is,
Hmm.
I think I'm a huge advocate for
Hmm.
of course.
I am too. So what would be a first step? And I swear this is the last question. What would be a first step for people that are seeking therapy? Where would you tell them to go look?
So the first thing that I always recommend is, if you have health insurance, is that you call, your health insurance and you find providers in your area. There are some therapists who are doing, in person, but probably the vast majority are doing telehealth. And so you might even
Hmm.
be able to find somebody in your state, because that's usually the way that we're licensed, is by state by state. Um, And you could find someone in your state who has, because you can go on, my favorite website actually is Psychology Today.
Okay.
um, because that's where you see the profile, and you can see
Hmm.
what issues people work with, and if someone is trauma informed, and
Hmm.
if someone's racial justice oriented. I think that that's really
Hmm.
important. You want to
Right.
make sure that it's a safe space for you, that it's in
Hmm.
alignment with what you're looking for. And so when you look at that profile, you get an idea, because like you said, it's like dating. So it's like,
Right.
you need to check out their profile and see what they're about.
Yes, yes, yes. And Nicole, do you have anything coming up? Any speaking engagements or anything? Where can everybody find you?
You know what? I don't have anything coming up. I've just
Okay.
been, practicing, seeing my clients, and,
Okay.
helping my associates. And I'm on social media, on Instagram, just liking everybody's posts and commenting on them and sharing
Well,
them.
can you put your Instagram and your website in the chat for everyone?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, and books that sew. Oh, you're a retired educator. Okay. And currently a substitute teacher. And she loves working with children. That's amazing, books that sew. And she says a good flow chart might help people identify their mental health. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I definitely agree with that. Okay, well, we are going to wrap this up. Nicole, I thank you so much for joining me and just letting people know we have to keep the conversation going. This won't be the last conversation. We just have to keep, this conversation about mental health and its importance going, and just really understanding trauma, especially in the times that we're in now.
Yeah.
We're all affected. We have all experienced a traumatic event, right?
Yes, we
So
have.
talk to somebody, just like you go get your checkups, you go see your OBGYN, you go get your physical, go check in with your mental health. You don't have to have something wrong with you to go see a therapist. Just go check on your mental health. That's it. Go talk to somebody. It's that easy. Just go talk. Well, it's not easy, but
It's
just go
worth
talk
it
to somebody.
though. It's worth it. It's worth
Yeah,
it. I can't
it's
stress it
worth it. It
enough.
isn't always easy, but it's worth it.
Hmm.
It's definitely worth it. Well, thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm Dr. Shadeiyah Edwards. I host this if you're new, I host this every Friday with my co-host who wasn't able to be here today. So next week, we're actually going to be talking about um, being in business in a saturated market, what that looks like. So week to week, we have different speakers come on. After this month, we're going to take a break because of holidays. And then you may find us on a podcast somewhere in the next year to come. Yes, I'm
It's
thinking
you.
about switching over, Nicole. Yes, so let me thank my guests. I really, really appreciate you coming on, Nicole. Um, like I said, this conversation needs to keep going. Thank you for all the support you give everyone. I hope that I'm pouring back into you just as you pour, into anybody, and hope that if you need anything, oh, my camera's messed up. Can you
Oh
see me, Nicole?
no. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There you are.
Anything, however I could support you, please let me know. Oh
Absolutely.
yes, Stacy, catch the replay. This is one of my friends who's she's a licensed social worker. Me and her used to work. We actually worked in forensic mental health together. That's where we met. Yeah, she's here in Los Angeles. Nicole, she's awesome. Yeah,
Oh,
so she's
cool.
a licensed social worker. Yes, okay, well, we are wrapping up. Thank you, Slayer. Great live, so informative. Yes, make sure everybody follow Nicole. I'm pretty sure Nicole answers DMs and she could refer you. And like I said, this is not to, oh, you're welcome. I think this is one of my previous students, I think.
Oh,
Make sure you talk to a mental health specialist. This is just this is not to advise you or anything of that nature. You know, Nicole was just giving some tips, but, you know, hop in Nicole's DM. You know, if you need a referral, you know, you can hop in my DM if you're here in LA and you need a referral to a therapist, and we'll make sure to assist you the best that we can. Thank you so much, Nicole. Everybody have a good evening. Enjoy your
Thank you.
weekend. Bye
Bye.
bye.